So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining the webinar, The Strong Earth NFT. It is on our hands with the presence of an amazing group of speakers that they do represent, I will call the history, but also the emotional impact that since many years has been related to sustainability and all the major issues that the world is facing now. So this webinar is going to be on two phases. The first phase, we're going to be debating about the technology, followed by a deep dive on the subject itself, and we'll finish with the concrete mint of the NFT of the watch that will be presented in a few minutes. So I have the honor to have with us Mrs. Anne Strong, President of the Manitou Foundation, Mirian Vilela, Executive Director of the Earth Chapter International, Geoffrey Lipman, former Assistant Secretary General of the World Tourist Organization and co-founder of the SUNx program, Felix Dodds, co-founder of the SUNx Strong Universal Network, and Jinfeng Zhou, Secretary General of China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation Project. This webinar is being broadcast live into social media, Facebook, YouTube, and also in China. So we have a very large community of Chinese friends that they are following us online. It is an important day. It's Earth Day. So we thought that will be a very important opportunity to, during this commemorative day, to deep dive on the history and discuss about the history of this amazing watch. So I'm going to be now activating the videos and everybody will go live in 1 second. So here we are. So hello everybody, pleasure to have you with us. It is a great opportunity to discuss the technology, but at the same time, all this amazing history. And so maybe just for the audience, because we have a very large audience, which are mainly related to NFT technology, and they have been participating in previous events where WiseKey has been auctioning NFT for very complex watches. We have done two in the past, one with Hublot and another with Jacobs, and now we have an amazing privilege to have with us this watch, which is a unique watch, and Mr. Lipman and Madame Strong will give us a background together with Mrs. Vilela on the history of this amazing watch. The NFT is basically non-fungible tokens. So the society today is full of fungible things that you own, but you cannot transfer. A car is fungible, a house is fungible, but you cannot just create another house and trade it. It's something that you use, you own. So thanks to the blockchain revolution and the fact that we can create digital twins, physical objects now can be transferred into digital objects. And the ownership of the digital object, because it's recorded in the blockchain, can basically prove that the owner of that digital object is equally as owner of the physical object. So NFT has emerged in the last weeks as a phenomenon. There has been major NFT on art, NFT on watches, NFT on real estate, NFT on intellectual property. So the NFT world is emerging ahead of us as a new way of basically creating a metaverse, what we call a digital space. In 10 years' time, 20 years' time, your ownership of the virtual world will be as important as the ownership of the physical world. As the new generation, especially millennials, they are not as attracted as maybe the non-millennials are to own physical objects. A physical object pollutes. You need to build the object. You need to use minerals, materials, gold, diamonds, and leather, and things that they are taking resources from Earth. So the concept of owning a digital object is actually is a climate-friendly activity. It is an activity that does not pollute because you just own something that is on the internet, and in the future will become a trend. We have been seeing trends in fashion. For instance, people are now willing to buy a digital fashion NFT rather of owning a physical product. So this idea of owning something which is digital and it's not physical is a breakthrough. And this is only possible due to the blockchain. When I record something in the blockchain, that becomes eternal. So if I record, which we're going to happen today, we're going to mint this watch, which has an amazing history, a history that is going to be described in this webinar. When we will be minting the watch on a NFT, which is going to be recorded in an NFT trading place, this version of the watch will be eternally on that blockchain. So even if we lose this watch in the future, even if somebody destroys the watch for whatever reasons, the history of the watch, the motion of the watch, everything that that watch represents will live eternally on the blockchain. And that's the main interest of this technology. So with that, I would like to transfer the moderation now to my friend Geoffrey Lipman. He's going to run the panel with these amazing speakers, and I will get back later on the activation of the NFT process, minting the NFT online, and we will walk you through the possibilities of participating in the auction, because this is going to be an auction. So you in less than 30 minutes, you will be able to start auctioning on this amazing watch. So Geoffrey, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Carlos. It's always a pleasure to be involved in this kind of event with you, and to listen to your deep knowledge of issues around the blockchain, the Internet of Things, and cybersecurity. And it's been a pleasure for me to learn from you, and to see what you have built at WiseKey as an organization which is at the forefront of this kind of activity, and also your originality in seeing this trend and in bringing it to us to share something here on Earth Day. I'm Jeff Lipman. I'm the president of SUNx, which is the Strong Universal Network. It's actually an organization that Felix, Dodds, and I established to carry the vision of Maurice Strong, who had been a friend and mentor to us for 25 years, I think in both our cases, Felix, when we interacted with Maurice when he was running the second of his big Earth summits, the Rio Earth Summit. And for 25 years, I had the pleasure of working with him in a sector which he felt was critically important to global transformation, which is the travel and tourism sector, which is driving directly and indirectly some 10% of the global economy, and which we have seen during the COVID crisis is an incredibly important part of that economy, particularly the small businesses, which are the lifeblood of developing states, of small island states, of so much of the international community. So it's against that background that we're so pleased today to be taking part with WiseKey in the launch of this NFT, this, I think, Carlos, the first sustainable development NFT. Yes. And nothing could be more appropriate than to be involved with something which was the property of the founder, the father of today's concept of sustainable development and climate resilience, and also to have with us his widow, Hanne Strong, and to be able to recount a little bit about Maurice's incredible contribution to the changing of the course of humanity. I think by the end of this seminar, you will hopefully realize how one man with a very strong conviction and a very powerful character was able to make such a change on the direction in which we were going, and I believe in which we will have to intensify our efforts. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Hanne Strong, who told me that she was married to Maurice for 45 years and she lived in 46 different homes. So you were truly a sustainability nomad, Hanne. Hanne is a contributor in her own right as the president of the Manitou Foundation in Colorado. She's done enormous work with indigenous society and with spiritual society. and has done much to bring that into the discourse on the future of our world. So, Hanne, would you like to start us off with some thoughts about Morris?
Hanne,
You have to unmute yourself, Hanne.
unmute.
You have to unmute your microphone. You have to go to the screen to the little red microphone and click it, and then we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So first I want to say I'm really happy to be here and on this International Mother Earth Day. So we're celebrating Mother Earth today. And of course, we have to give gratitude for everything she gives us. Everything that keeps us alive comes from the earth and the elements of the earth. So I want to give you a little bit of history on, the whole movement. And it's now just about 50 years since the first UN conference in Stockholm. So 50 years ago, my husband brought leaders together in Stockholm. And at that time, there was no environmental protection agencies anywhere in the world. So this was a first. And he warned the world at that time, not only about climate change, but collapsing of ecosystems and what we had done to the air, to the waters. I mean, this is the time when rivers were in flames and, in Tokyo, you couldn't see 2 feet ahead of yourself from the smog. So the world was in really bad shape at that time. And, he called for, radical changes and urgent action. And, he predicted the future economic, social, environmental, and climatic impacts of overconsumption. And he went to say that these human impacts would create a swift domino effect leading to the demise of life as we know it. So just to illustrate, the serious situation that we're in now, we made very close friends with Jacques Cousteau. And right after the Stockholm conference, he did a scientific study to determine how many people the Earth could support without ecosystem collapse if we were to continue the consumption patterns of the West. The study concluded, he fed in every bit of consumption, fossil fuels, food, and whatever we used to build with. So he fed in all the consumption into the early computers. And what came out was that Earth can support 400 million people if we live and consume the way we're doing now. And this was backed up by Paul Ehrlich, Stanford biologist and the author of Limits to Growth. He calculated that Earth could support 500 million. So both of these statistics are startling. And now that we approach 8 billion people, it looks like we're going to need 16 Earths to support what's happening right now in consumption. And we all know that that is not possible. So one of his biggest concerns, of course, was the next generation. They are inheriting this mess that we have created. What are they going to do? So he always believed that education was, the way to move up the consciousness of humanity. And his vision was, and this was in his later years, after the Earth Summit in Rio, that he wanted to see a string of educational institutions around the world, world environment universities. And, he put together some curriculum material, and he wanted IUCN to be the principal partner in developing the programs. But this would be to give the next generation the latest of research in how to, maybe restore the environment, restore the ecosystems, research how to clean up, the waters, the airs, the soils. I mean, most of the soils around the world, are not very much alive because of all the chemicals we put in there. So, and then of course we have Gates who wants to dim the sun. So we have all these people that want to play God, but they're very simple and very sophisticated techniques, solar and wind, and to make this world more sustainable. And we're going to have to scale down on the consumption. We're going to have to scale way down on consumption. So we know we're in trouble, and we're leaving a very troubled world to our young people. And I know, Geoffrey, that you're planning to train 100,000 young people. So that's good. And the Earth Restoration Corps, which we developed here and launched it in Rio, we're planning to also go around the world and help train young people in restoration techniques. So I want to thank you, Geoffrey, for keeping Maurice's legacy alive, and Miriam, and all of you that have worked on keeping Maurice's legacy alive, because he definitely put the environmental movement on the map. And after Stockholm, every country had developed a agency to look after the environment. So there's a lot of history here. And so I want to talk a little bit about this watch. Governments did not want to give Maurice much money, so they gave as little as possible to carry off Stockholm, to carry off the Rio Earth Summit, but he knew how to raise money on the side. And this idea to go to Swatch, Mr. Hayek and his wife, and we spent a lot of time with them, and he designed this watch himself, and they agreed to produce it. So we're in Switzerland at the time when the first watch came off the line, and Mrs. Hayek went over, took off the first watch off the line and handed it to me, which of course wasn't what she was meant to do, but anyway, she did it. So I have the first watch off the line, and this watch, when they sold it, raised an enormous amount of money, and Maurice was able to bring large numbers of NGOs. I mean, Rio had about 60,000 people attending, 10,000 press alone. And when the NGOs came in, I would say about 12,000. And then the indigenous people came in, and all the other groups. So this swatch was very, very important to bring the civil society into Rio. So I want to thank everybody again. And Carlos, thank you so much for doing this. And let's hope we can raise a lot of money for young people to restore the earth. Anyway, that's what I had to contribute.
I just want to take you back to Rio, Hanne, because there were 124 world leaders at Rio.
Right.
All of us here, Felix was there, I was there. It was an incredible event, but a key thing is that there was this whole amazing interaction with people who were not government leaders, indigenous peoples, spiritual leaders, local council leaders. And this was something I wanted to pick up from your comments, because you did paint a fairly bleak picture. And I think I know you'll agree with me that one of the things that Maurice always had was a vision of hope. That, yes, we have these enormous challenges, but if we bring a collective force to bear on them, not just the leadership of society, but the base of the pyramid, the grassroots as well, we have a capacity for dealing with these issues. And I think you'll also agree with me that he didn't just talk. He created institutions which are now part of our language, the UN climate system, the UN environment system. All of these came from the fertile brain of your then husband.
Right. I also want to mention one other thing, actually, because, of course, Agenda 21 came out of Rio. And, when all the world leaders went up, they each had 7 minutes to talk.
Yes.
And when Castro, and everybody was so worried about Castro that he would keep on talking and talking and talking. So when he goes up to the stage, he goes like this to Maurice, 5. He's only going to talk for 5 minutes. And he gave the most brilliant speech of all the world leaders. And he's the only one that went back to Cuba and implemented Agenda 21. So just a little notice, because most of the governments really didn't do anything about implementing Agenda 21.
Well, I appreciate your comment. I'm a little bit more optimistic. I just think they take a long time, and we have, you've just had 4 years in your country of absolute denialism from one of the most powerful countries and one of the largest polluting countries in the world, and this is how our society moves. It moves not in any logical fashion. It stumbles from one thing to another. But I think any objective analysis of that timeline from Stockholm in 72 to the creation of the United Nations Environment Programme, again by Maurice, and you lived in Nairobi for many years, to the Brundtland Commission, which defined sustainable development, to the Rio Earth Summit, and then through to the Sustainable Development Goals via the Millennium Development Goals. And I'm going to call in Felix here, Felix Dodds, who's another close friend of Maurice, wrote a book with him called Only One Earth. I look upon Felix as Boswell to Johnson, someone who manages to get the ideas from the great man and package them in such a way that they come into the public domain. Felix, your thoughts on, starting with Hanne's analysis that we're in a pretty bad place as a result of overconsumption. how do you feel as an observer and a participant in the development of what I call the UN roadmap for a better future, the SDGs with its 2030 timeframe, and the Paris Climate Agreement with its 2050 timeframe? Is there a path forward that you see which came out of basically the Rio Earth Summit in '92?
Thanks, Geoffrey and Hanne. I've got a couple of comments. I mean, one thing is, if you go back to the Stockholm outcome documents, you will find the first UN document that mentions climate change as a problem. And as Hanne indicated, out of, I think it's section 70, which looks at governments mindful of activities in which there is a appreciable risk of the effects on climate, should carefully evaluate the likelihood and magnitude of climatic effects and disseminate their findings to the maximum extent possible. And so Morris was also, in a sense, the first person to really push at the intergovernmental level the issue of climate change. If you go to to the Rio Summit in '92, Hanne mentioned Agenda 21, 40 chapters, 9 of them for the first time giving rights and responsibilities for stakeholders. So industry was one of them, NGOs, indigenous peoples were given their own space, women, youth. And in 10 years, over 2,000 local Agenda 21s were produced. So had a big impact on the engagement of stakeholders in taking forward the Rio process. But you also had the Rio Declaration. And the Rio Declaration was 27 principles: the polluter pays principle, the principle of prior informed consent, common and differentiated responsibility, all things that have been embedded in some way into international agreements or into national legislation. But as important, and which people fail to realize perhaps, is it birthed something like 6 or 7 legally binding international agreements. It wasn't just climate and biodiversity. 2 years later, you had the Desertification Convention. 3 years later, you had the ratification of the straddling fish stocks. Out of the chemicals chapter of Agenda 21, the conventions on persistent organic pollutants and prior informed consent for hazardous chemicals came. So it by itself birthed the largest amount of international regulation that we have ever seen out of one thing. And today we're on Earth Day. And what has happened? We've seen on the issue of climate change, President Biden announced up to 52% cut in CO2 emissions by 2030.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal.
It is. And we've had the UK go up to 68%. We've had China announce earlier than that 55% by 26 China to be carbon neutral by 2060, which impacts by bringing down the temperature by 0.2 or 0.3 degrees. And Morris deserves a lot of credit for, with Hanne, going into China in the early 2000s to work with the Chinese government to help them to address these important issues.
Yes, no, thank you for that insight, Felix. And, you know, going back to the watch and the bringing of all of these diverse groups to Rio, it was an incredible contribution that Swatch made that produced the funds, because if that hadn't happened, a lot of the work that you did in the stakeholder forum, and I'm noting in the questions and answers, there's a note here from Brett Willers, who says, please don't forget the development of ICLE and, yes, and the development of local Agenda 21s and cities and towns across the world. It was this creation of a movement at the grassroots level. Whilst the leaders expressed a grand strategy, all these institutional pieces were put in place, which allowed the messages to get out across the spectrum of society.
And you should add to that what became the World Business Council for Sustainable Development was also, with Smith-Hyme, a critical organizations set up to bring together the top CEOs within business who wanted to do something. So I think that legacy of creating those building blocks, ICLEI, of course, is one of them, but I think the World Business Council is also another.
And we're happy to have with us today, thank you, Felix, Mirian Vilela, who was there side by side with Maurice and Hanne in Rio, and who is the executive director of another one of those institutional frameworks that Maurice put in place, the Earth Council, eventually along with Mikhail Gorbachev, and a very important charter, which I knew was being developed, Miriam, but I read it much more recently again, and it's an incredible document and a testimony to the vision of Maurice and a group of people he brought together to craft what is in effect a contract between humanity and the earth. Miriam, tell us a little bit about your experiences and the work you're doing at the Earth Charter Institute.
Yes, thank you, Geoffrey, and I'm very happy to join you today for this conversation. Indeed, Mr. Strong was a visionary, as we all know, and at the end of the Earth Summit in '92, he saw that there were a couple of unfinished business of the Earth Summit, and the Earth Charter was one of them, and therefore he wanted to continue galvanizing support and engage different groups from around the world in thinking about how to craft the values and principles of sustainability in a more just and peaceful world in the framework of an Earth Charter. So he joined efforts with Mikhail Gorbachev in '94 and launched the Earth Charter initiative that was actually already part of the Earth Summit agenda, but this time both of them agreed that there was a need to engage non-state actors, civil society, indigenous people, youth, business leaders around the crafting of what they called Earth Charter. So the movement grew, of course, and they brought together many other world leaders in thinking about what their charter should look like, and then it was launched again in the year 2000.
And they had very serious debates. I remember being with you in Costa Rica on a couple of occasions, and a very eclectic, diverse group of thinkers that Maurice always seemed to be able to bring together people, actually discussing language, a term here, a word there. I mean, there was enormous discussion about the implications of what went into the Earth Charter.
Indeed, indeed. And but he was also very concerned with the importance of not leaving it in words, and therefore he foresaw the importance of bringing it to young people. And therefore we, in the year 2000, we launched with his vision the idea of engaging, empowering, and educating young leaders with using their charter as an educational instrument. And since then, one of our efforts have been to engage and empower young leaders to become ethical leaders committed to the vision of sustainability that is articulated in their charter. But let me just add one point with regards to the watch. It was a unique partnership that Mr. Strong did with Mr. Hayek, the CEO of the Swatch Watch. And this partnership allowed diverse groups to come to Rio, but I think also it sparked the interest of many groups to continue to be engaged and involved in the sustainability agenda. This Swatch Watch carries the logo of the Earth Summit, but also the slogan, the '92 Earth Summit slogan, which was "In Our Hands," which is it's a communication articulation from the vision of Mr. Strong on the importance that the future the possibility of life on Earth is in our hands. It depends on the decisions we make every day. And this particular Swatch watch was developed on purpose as an automatic watch. Of course, to avoid the use of batteries, which is a watch that should be somehow coherent with the vision of sustainability and in diminishing the impact that we generate on the environment. So thank you.
Yeah, and Miriam, there's something, and Hanne too, something that's very much Morris strong about that expression. It's in our hands. He was a plain speaking man with an incredibly brilliant sense of humor. And there's a little bit of that sort of humor in you know, the watch and the hands, and it's in our hands. I can see that, and Hanne, I'm sure, you know, Morris's humor and his jokes bring back something also to you very much. Miriam, I will move on from there. I'd like to thank you very much for that, and I really want to suggest to anybody who's listening, take a look at the Earth Charter. It's as relevant today as it was in the days when it's being developed. And I just want to say you and your team are doing terrific work, Miriam, in getting this message out. I don't think it's well enough understood just how good that work is. It's also a credit to Costa Rica that they've been a good home to you for so many years.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
And our old friend Jose Maria Figueras, the president, who invited you to come there and was such a strong supporter of this work. I'm going to go to our last speaker, and because it's also very much the last part of Morris's life, Hanne, his
Right.
China, and how important China was in his mind to the future of our the positive, peaceful development of humanity. When other people were attacking China, Morris was always someone who saw that China could be an incredible force for good. I was fortunate to spend some years of his final years in his company activity in China, and he loved China. He loved the Chinese people. He was like a grandfather to so many young kids around there. And I'm going to go to Jinfeng Zhou in Beijing. Jinfeng, I hope you're still with us. I don't see you on the screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Jinfeng, hi, good to see you. Jinfeng
Yes.
Zhou is not only the Secretary General of CBCGDF, which he'll tell us about, China Biodiversity Convention and Green Development Fund, which is also part of, inspired partly by Morris, but Jinfeng is also an executive council member of the Club of Rome. We last saw each other in Rome during the 50th anniversary of the Club of Rome. And he's doing amazing work in China, in conservation, in wildlife protection. I think there's no other organization as active in this field as Jinfeng's organization. Talk to us a little bit about you and Morris and China, Jinfeng.
Yes, thank you. We are so honored to be invited to participate in this great event in memory of Mr. Morris Zhou. And we have filed over 100 litigations in China against many major companies, including Alibaba, including China State Grid, including all those top business. And also, every single year, we have over 2 million college students participate in our environmental knowledge competition. And also, we changed many laws, regulations in China, including the wildlife eating ban was proposed by our organization. and we take pangolin scale out of China pharmacopoeia, and as well as many others. Many people ask me why and how you can achieve all this. I want to tell you, it is because of Mr. Maurice Strong. He is our lovely mentor, supporter, and friend. And he was leading us. He is leading us. He will be leading us in the future as well towards by the people, for the people, to encourage, to change through our human-based solution to change our habit, the future of our habitats. We diversify, we educate, we activate environmental movements in China. Not only me and not only my organization, all top leaders of China recently and up to the many early years are inspired by Maurice Strong. In fact, the leader of China delegates personally told me, and if it's not Mr. Maurice Strong, China will not participate the first summit. And it was, if it's not Maurice Strong, there will be no conclusion. There will be no result of the summit. These days, including our former state consulate, Sun, including our first Minister of Environment, Qu Geping, they talked to me personally how Maurice Strong lead China into the environmental movements worldwide. It is so important because from today's point of view, China is so fast growing, developing. If we do not at that early stage pay attention to environment, we are going to have an even worse disaster of environment through the China developments. So today, I really hope the auction, Chinese entrepreneurs will win finally of the auction because we own more strong the work. We need to do something. If it's not, it's my fault. We haven't got enough Chinese people, entrepreneurs, know this event. So I applied for yesterday to Carlos. We want to do broadcasting of the event. We want to make it into Chinese. We want to give us time and give us the opportunity to participate. We will follow Maurice Strong's guidance to work together worldwide to make it good, the world a better one for all lives. Thank you.
Geoffrey, just before you come in, it's interesting to know that in fact the 72 conference was the first international conference that China attended as a full member of the United Nations. And so, you know, it is an interesting relationship that Maurice has with them because of that.
Well, I was going to add, Felix, I think that's a very important point. And Hanne, you will recall this. Maurice had this wonderful story about when he visited Mrs. Gandhi in 1972. And at that time, the world was even more polarized, if you can imagine it. And the group of 77 developing states with countries, massive population countries like China and India. And there was a lot of concern that the group of 77 would actually boycott the 72 Stockholm conference. And Maurice tells the story that without approval, he flew to India to meet with Mrs. Gandhi, and he got an audience with Mrs. Gandhi. And he went in and he told this story. Hanne, you'll be very familiar with it. He said that—
Well, I was actually there.
I didn't know that. But he told me that he went in to see Mrs. Gandhi and she had no idea why he was there. And she asked him, "Why have you come to see me, Mr. Strong?" And Morris said, "I've come to persuade you to come to this international conference. If you come, it will be a success. And if you don't come, it will be a failure. And the future of humanity depends on it." And he looked across the desk at her in Mrs. Gandhi's office, and she looked at him and she didn't say anything. She stared at him, according to the story as he told it. And it was for a very, very, very long time. It was probably a minute and a half that she stared at him. And
It
Morris
was
Strong,
much more than that.
was it? Well, Morris Strong had been brought up as a young man with the Inuit indigenous people in Canada. And they would go for long periods without speaking to each other. And tempted though he was to try to persuade Mrs. Gandhi, he just kept silent with this pregnant pause surrounding them. And in the end, as I understand it, she looked at him and she said, "I'll come to your conference, Mr. Strong," and shook his hand across the table. And that was it. And the entire future of the UN negotiations, which ultimately led, as we've talked about today, to the SDGs and Paris framework, this is where it started. Halfway along the path was Rio. And this watch, which we are going to put up as an NFT today, is really one of the true sort of memorials of this whole effort. So I'd like to thank all of you who took part in this panel. I want to give the floor back to my friend Felix for the minting of the watch. And I want to echo Jinfeng's words that we hope people who want to become collectors of something which is totally different, completely unique, the first watch off the line, digitally enhanced, on the blockchain. Our friend Carlos is now going to make this happen. Carlos, back to you, and thank you so much for organizing this.
Thank you, Geoffrey, and it is an amazing history, which is now going to be encapsulated into the NFT. This emotional journey since 1992 to protect the Earth, I think is important for future generations. It is essential, as Madam Strong say. I am also, in my own capacity, on securing the internet for future generations, fighting for the same endeavor. As we have a complex world that needs to be simplified in order to let our kids to live, lives that they are sustainable and at the same time humans. So it is on our hands to do now the first ever NFT.
Carlos, just before you do this, just let me say, I should have said Carlos is now a hugely successful author, including in China, Jinfeng, with his book, The Transhuman Code, which is an excellent read and which identifies the critical importance of keeping humanity at the center of this incredibly evolving technology. So we're very pleased, Carlos, that you have that dimension to add to this discussion today.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. Indeed, the Transhuman Code is a reflection to bring human back to the control, and not as many other movements like Singularity and others. They're saying humans is a liability, and in a few years' time, robots will take over. So we are here to stay, right? So anyway, it is on our hands today, really, to do the first ever sustainability NFT. So this video, which in a few years' time will be viewed as an historical video, because it compiles really this journey since 1992 to today, on where basically we are just doing the same thing. This comment before from you guys, that the watch didn't have batteries as a way to ensure that they will not be polluting. This is visionary. 1992, no batteries. This is amazing, especially for a watch. So now we are not going to need even a watch anymore, because a watch. I got somebody from the Q&A saying, "Is this watch recycled? Can you recycle this?" Well, obviously it's not. That was done in '82, but what it is not polluting, not material, totally recycling is the NFT we're going to create. So we're going to go now to the process. This is a technology process, so this is happening as we speak. It has not been recorded or regenerated. So here we have, we're on the blockchain now. So this is the image of the watch. That image is going to be mint into a ledger. So it's going to go into the blockchain. And one of the characteristics of the blockchain is that it is immutable, cannot be modified, cannot be changed, cannot be deleted. It is truly a piece for eternity. It will be there as long as the world exists because it is going to be minted into the blockchain. So you have the details of the watch. That's also, this information is not possible to change anymore. And you have now this button which says sell. So now we're going to go and activate the sales of the watch. So this is going to be an auction. We are going to be deciding. You can set a price or you can do a highest bid, which is what we're going to do. That means that the person will make a highest bid will be owner of the NFT of the watch. Later, as the event will progress, if we reach a threshold of an amount which corresponds to the emotional value of that watch, and that will be discretional to Madame Strong to sell or not the original watch. But for the moment, what we are doing here is putting in auction the digital twin, the NFT of the watch. So we're going to start with a minimum bid. This is going to be done in Ethers. So Ether is a cryptocurrency. It's like Bitcoin. The Ether is actually booming now. It's an historical price now. And we're going to say that the minimum bid, just to start, because people will start to bid as we enter into the auction. Let's put it, for instance, 2 Ether, which is the equivalent of something like $5,000 now, as we speak. And then here we're going to say we want to a reserve price, means it is the price from where Madame Strong will take the decision whether she just sell the digital twin, the NFT, or the watch. It is important to say, and we're going to say here 20 as the reserve price. It is important to know that this money is actually not going to anybody in particular. There is a smart contract that is being created, which has already, and after I mean that, maybe Geoffrey can deploy a bit further where the money goes. This money will go to causes identified by Madame Strong and the team on this webinar. The expiration date, we're going to put it a specific date, and my understanding, Geoffrey, was that you want to do that coinciding with another big event on sustainability?
Yeah, it's the 5th of June, which is World Environment Day. We think that to start the auction on Earth Day and to finish it on World Environment Day would be meaningful and would give a reasonable time to get the message out to potential bidders that this incredible memorabilia is actually there for people to bid on. Perfect. So that's been already coded. The expiration date is being coded, and during that period, all the content that has been generated on the webinar will be accessible as well to the bidder. Obviously, we can add few things more. For instance, if we go to the price that exceeds the reserve price, we could also invite the person that will buy the NFT to a specific event. Maybe it's a person that it is already involved in sustainability projects. So those are things that are going to be developed during the month as to make as appealing as possible the acquisition of this NFT. So, okay, so now we're going to create, we're going to post the listing. So now we are activating, as we speak now, we are minting, it's like minting a note, we are minting the NFT of the watch on the blockchain. So so that takes a process. Now we're going to digitally sign, and this is where WiseKey technology becomes important, because we're going to make the relation between the original watch and the virtual NFT. It's like the body and the soul. We're going to establish the relation between both of them. And here we are now with a starting price of $5,000. So this is the beginning.
So that means that anyone that will start to, as soon as this is being published, we're going to publish the link, the URL. This is going to be published on social media. It's going to be sent to the participants on this webinar. We're going to be broadcasting in China. We have an amazing Chinese community now participating in this event, and it has been translated to Chinese. So we will be expanding the reach of the ecosystem of people that will be participating. The URL will bring you to this site, and anyone with a crypto wallet means that they have already investors in blockchain related cryptocurrencies like Ethers or Bitcoin and others can participate to this NFT auction. It is important to note that this is a good moment to do this because Ether is historical. Actually, today is the historical price for Ether. It has never been that high ever. And this cryptocurrency community now is very wealthy. It is $1.7 trillion community that has been exponentially growing since the last 3 years. And this obviously will give ideas to other sustainability causes. Then they will have unique objects like watches or treaties or pictures or videos of events that reflect an important moment in history, as it was the 1992 Rio Summit, which needs to be remembered not only in our generations, but in future generations. And obviously all that related to the memory of Maurice Strong as being the visionary and the trailblazer that put for first time ever this subject on the table of governments, that the world is limited and we cannot exploit the resources of Mother Earth in an irresponsible way. So that's it. That's what it is. Now the watch is on the net, and the URL will be communicated by email and social media. And if you go to both social media, or WiseKey or SUNx or all the social media that has been broadcasting this historical event, the URL is there and you can already start to participate. So thank you very much. It happened. It's there.
This may be a good moment just before you finish to pick up on your point about what the funds are going to be used for. Because the organizations which are working with you on this, the Manitou Foundation that Hanne represents, the Earth Charter Institute and the Earth Council that Mirian represents, and SUNx, which I represent, are all not-for-profit entities. And we have agreed between us that we will use any funds raised to help train the next generation of leaders and decision makers and thinkers in this area. And so this is not something where Hanne is looking to sell something to make a profit out of it. We intend that the results of this auction, the first of its kind in the massive sustainable development world, will be used to get the next generation supported in making the transformation which we all know we have to make. And Carlos, in concluding, I rather like your idea that other people might be looking at this, and you can have kind of a museum of a digital museum of these great events on the green and clean transformation path, which many people will have pieces that they might want to bring into the same framework. And I know that you guys at WiseKey would be very happy to work with people on that.
Absolutely. And again, I think the fact that we are truly well represented in terms of geography, Jinfeng has done an amazing support by broadcasting us in China. So thank you very much for that support. China has a lot of history. I mean, you are 5,000 years of history. Imagine so many amazing things that China has. That could be NFT in a special Chinese event that we could work together to organize. Yes, that's the idea. The idea, as I said before, is that there is a very large young people community that they understand this technology, then they prefer to buy non-material objects so they don't pollute the world anymore, and just use digital object as a way to satisfy their collectors or ownership requirements. So thank you very much all. I don't know if anybody wants to say any further final words.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate the United Nations on the declaration of the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which begins this year. So the next decade is going to be the decade of restoring Mother Earth.
Well,
And I think I'm a little more what would I say, down to earth in a sense. I'd like to congratulate the United States and China on signing an agreement this last week that will see them both joining forces to actually bring down their carbon pollution impacts. A quite historical and incredible agreement. And I think if Morris was still with us, Hanne, he would be on the sidelines applauding this.
I'm sure he would. He would be very happy.
Thank you, Carlos. It's all back to you to close it out.
Thank you, Carlos.
thank you, Hanne. Thank you, Felix, Jinfeng, Geoffrey, and everybody participating. Thank you also for the team behind all this, which are there, but we cannot see, and they are instrumental to the success of those events. And my personal support and my company is there to really develop the vision of Mr. Strong to create a sustainable world. We are maybe in the last generation that we can make that happen, and there is no way back. And technology is there, which is good news. Technologies can be used as fire. We can burn things, or we can light our houses, and that's the way we need to use it. So thank you very much for joining us on this webinar. God bless you and wish you the best. All the best.
Thank you.